History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're super excited about our episode on today as we will honor the life and legacy of the Dr. Dorothy Irene Heights, who was a phenomenal woman and a trailblazer. So we're super excited to celebrate this tomorrow will be her 111th birthday that we will want to commemorate and celebrate and to lift up on today. But before we jump into that, we want to make sure if you're already watching, you're here. So make sure you tell others about Fannie Lou's Classroom, where they can like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live on Thursdays at 12 o'clock noon. So last thing I want to mention before we jump into today's show, I meant to mention this on last week. We are having this weekend at Friendship West, the WOW Ministry will be hosting a sip and see, or really a WOW weekend, Women of the West weekend. And on Saturday, there will be a sip and see where we will honor women of the social justice movement, and we will have a museum that's being curated by our children. So it'll be an amazing time. You can go on friendshipwest.org, see the calendar of events, and you can simply click sip and see, register, and be a part of that amazing event that's going to take place on this Saturday. And then on Sunday, we'll also continue the WOW weekend. We have a special guest preacher who is a good friend of mine, the Dr. or the Reverend Francis Cudjoe Waters will be with us on Saturday and on Sunday. So you certainly do not want to miss this phenomenal woman to close out International Women's History Month. And so how befitting that we are going to talk about really two great women on today. We'll talk about one woman who I would say laid the foundation for Dr. Irene Heights to really flourish and to do all that God really designed her to do. So we're going to just jump right in on today. So first, I'm saying we have guests. As you may see on the screen right now that we have guests Cheryl Prelow and Sheneca Wilkerson. But you all know they are behind the scenes oftentimes doing all the work to get us ready for the classroom every single week. So again, they're here in front of the camera on today. And y'all know how Cheryl shows out when the camera gets on her. So we're going to see how she does on today with the camera being on her. So I'm super excited to have them because, as you know, last time we did this, we honored Fannie Lou Hamer as we celebrated her birthday. So we found it befitting that all of us would just come together as a team and talk about, what it means to celebrate Dr. Irene Heights. But first, what does it mean for us to talk about Mary McLeod Bethune, who was really, ahead of her time, in my opinion. She was well ahead of her time in what she was able to accomplish, being born to parents who were formerly enslaved, and what she was able to do by way of rising up in this country that oftentimes and still at times does not protect, respect Black women. And she did some amazing work at a time when not only she was dealing with racism and sexism externally, she dealt with that internally within the Black community, but certainly that didn't deter her. So we're going to talk a little bit about her as we go into Dr. Height and all that she was able to do at the National Council of Negro Women. So I'm going to go ahead and read Cheryl and Sheneca's bio so you can get reacquainted with them, so you can know how great they are and why they are going to be amazing guests today. Or not guests, but just team members who are coming to celebrate today. Because they're not guests. They're at home. They're not guests. So we tried to recruit Brooke, but she decided to stay behind the scenes and just do her engineering today. I tried, y'all. We're going to get on here one day. We're going to have Brooke so y'all can see how Brooke look and how she show up in this space and holds us down every week. Okay, Cheryl Prelow offers more than 25 years of extraordinary success and a series of high-level roles at top-tier companies that include Prism Health North Texas, Dallas County Medical Society, Texas Health Resources, Health Midwest Medical Group, Samuel E. Rodgers Community Health Center, Detroit Medical Center, and Trauma Medical Center. Currently, Cheryl is providing strategic and operational consulting service for local nonprofits that address determinants of health by focusing on social justice and racial equity issues. Cheryl's invaluable expertise and broad business range have powered a history of developing successful process redesigns and improvements that drive productivity, reliability, and client satisfaction. Such traits have consistently enabled Cheryl to achieve an impressive command of the skills needed to manage ongoing business planning processes while developing strategies to meet future challenges. Cheryl has dedicated herself and her vision as a transformational and servant leader who engages in projects with an all-in attitude. Combining her proven business instinct with an unprecedented disciplinary work ethic, Cheryl has continuously exceeded expectations in high-stake environments within Prism Health North Texas, Dallas County Medical Society, Texas Health Resources, Health Midwest Medical Group, Samuel R. Rodgers Community Health Center, Detroit Medical Center, and Trauma Medical Center, positioning herself as a key member for each company and driving force of growth. Cheryl is a doctoral candidate in public health and holds a Master of Health Administration and Bachelor of Arts degree in biology from the University of Missouri at Columbia. So let's welcome our teammates in our class, Fannie Lou classroom. We all classmates at the Fannie Lou's classroom. She's here every week anyway. And so that's a lot that Cheryl's bio says, but let me tell you, all that is true. She has an incredible work ethic, and she brings a lot of invaluable expertise and leadership experience to Friendship West, as she also not only helps with the classroom, but she certainly helps out in our Justice Department, helping us kind of shape and frame and develop strategies so that we can do our justice work more effectively and efficiently and have an impact, not just for now, but for generations to come. So we certainly thank her for her service, not only outside the church, but also within the church and the church writ large. So thank you, Cheryl. And then we have Sheneca, who y'all know Sheneca doesn't talk long. So you're gonna hear more from her today, though. So Sheneca, for the past 7 years, Sheneca has effectively and efficiently illustrated a strong sense of achievement in various arenas within 2 mega churches in Dallas, Texas, as a membership specialist at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, and now as the administrative assistant and program coordinator for the justice and executive pastors of Friendship West Baptist Church. That'd be me. And then our new executive pastor, Pastor David Malcolm Magruder. Under the leadership of Pastor of Justice, Reverend Danielle Ayers, and Executive Pastor Dr. David Malcolm Magruder, Wilkerson utilizes her gifts and talents by organizing and managing schedules, promoting proficient communication between partners within and outside of Friendship West, and assisting with the coordination of initiatives and events within each of the directed departments that enrich, engage, and empower the staff, congregation, and community. She aims to be an essential resource, a pillar of knowledge and support for Friendship West and within her community. Did y'all hear that? A pillar of knowledge. Mm-hmm. So we want to welcome Sheneca to the classroom. And so we do appreciate, Sheneca, you've been here for a year and a half, maybe? Yeah. Or just a year and a few months? A year and a few months, and she can probably talk about how much she learned already. Because we do what's called immersion experience. Yes, when you do the justice work, it's so much. With justice work, you have to get in because we're always moving. We're always trying to have these movements, not moments. And so she juggles quite a bit. And so we thank God for her life and her ministry here at Friendship West. So let's jump right in then, ladies. So let's first talk about the woman who really, I would say, blazed trails and really set the tone for Dr. Dorothy Irene Heights to come along. Let's talk about Mary McLeod Bethune. So let me start it this way. So Cheryl, maybe you can start us off and tell me what most impressed you about Bethune.
Oh, wow. So so many things, but given my health administration and public health background, I would say that was probably one of the things that stood out the most about Dr. Bethune. Just realizing that way back in the early 1900s, she understood the impact of health disparities and that she had the initiative to try to right that by doing a couple of things. One, she created a hospital so that African Americans could go and be seen. Mm-hmm. And I think that it was like the first of its kind on the East Coast in order for people who look like us to be cared for in a humane and appropriate manner. And then also she started a training school for nurses. So again, recognizing that having essential healthcare providers, not only, the physician there, the nurses, but those kind of other support teams, like medical assistants and orderlies, those types of individuals, just having the wherewithal to create a hospital back in the early 1900s as an African-American woman, I found was just absolutely amazing. And then the other thing I found really extraordinary about her from the public health standpoint was that she bought land to make sure that our people had access to the beach. So, people may not think that's a big deal, but actually that's pretty significant. One, you're able to be outside, vitamin D, we all need that, and kind of just interact with one another and just kind of be out in the element, and also give us an opportunity to show off and demonstrate that we do have that skill that most people think that we don't have, that we know how to swim. So even if you didn't know, you could learn how to, because you didn't have to worry about not being allowed in a pool because you had a stretch of the beach that she owned that we could get out there and interact as family and learn how to do things. So just seeing her early efforts around health disparities, which that wasn't a word, that wasn't a thing back then, but to have the intuition to understand that we need to begin to address some of these things that impact our physical and mental and spiritual well-being. I found that was probably one of the most impactful things about researching her.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a lot of good points about her, and I think and let's just stay with just what you said alone. So you think about, of course, it wasn't called health disparities then, but I think what Bethune had and understood, I think it was that still somewhere in there, that African sense of no separation from body and soul, right? So she understood that we got to care about the whole person and what that meant and what they like in her day and time. And I think a landowner.
I know.
A landowner, and you got beachfront property. Come on, let's be clear,
Yes.
And I also think, I think about Howard Thurman in this moment too, because, Thurman's house is not too far from the beach. So he was, as a mystic, he was really in tune with nature. And I almost sometimes think about, but then if she also, to your point, like being out in nature, if that was part of her thought process, that for us to be connected and grounded to the land is also a part of our healing and a place for us to be, or to go and just be, and away from it all. So, because they're right there together, and I've been to Bethune-Cookman before, and it's just crazy to understand those legacies right there together in Daytona Beach.
Yes.
And that the water was right there and what that water meant for healing, right? But also understanding that at one point how we came across those waters.
Yes.
Right? In a different way, and how it's almost somewhat of, if you go to Africa, some of the slave castles, they often take you to the door of no return. And depending on which one you go to, you can walk out and come back in, right? So I just think about that. I don't know if they thought about that, but I know our ancestors were certainly more in tune to in terms of history and what it meant. So I'm just also wondering, like, if they thought about that. That's just a thought as she bought that land. So Sheneca, what most impresses you about Bethune?
The thing that most impressed me about Dr. Bethune was, first of all, that she was the first person born in her family outside of slavery. So she was, in that generation, she was the first person that was. And then she was also the first person in her family that could afford a formal education, which, with us, education has always been a major part of how we learned and grew. And even when I said I want to be a pillar of knowledge, just being in this experience and just looking at how our ancestors even taught themselves a lot of the things that they learned. And I think that's something that we have to get back to. It's just, being able to teach ourselves and just like you said, learning so much, just being in this job for over a year and a half. It's like you said, I'm in this emergent experience of having to learn about, the different ladies. So, and education has always been a big part of my life as well, because my family didn't really, focus on education as a priority. I had one cousin in my family that I really looked at as the pillar of the person who taught me what it meant to get a formal education. And so I think that's one of the things. And then the fact that she started a school herself. And within that school, she had 5 girls, 5 6-year-old girls, and then her son. And she started a school, and that's what I was saying about how Black women, we use what we have in order to, make progress. And I think that's been us just for overall for years. We've just had to use, and not to compare her starting a school with, just looking back at my mom and my grandma. We would look in the refrigerator and the cabinets and think that there was nothing there, but they used what they had, and we would be like, where'd that come from? So it was more of that type of thing. So I think those are some of the things that really impressed me at first about her.
Yeah, and you can really say something.
Just to add on to her starting that school, starting with 6 people, 6 children, and then in a couple of years to 250. And then when you talk about her ingenuity and using what was before her, creating, making pencils.
Yeah.
And, making mattresses, so if she didn't have it, she figured out how to create it and create a learning environment. And, as we think about International Women's History Month and just the impact that women have, we have it within ourselves. And, we have to be the leaders to really kind of move us forward. And I know we'll probably get to a little bit of this a little bit later, but just to see her doing this back in 1904, that is just amazing. I think it's critical that our young folks, or our people in general, but definitely now with all the challenges around education, that they understand and know who she is and what she was able to do and her contributions and how she has, created, really kind of a roadmap for us to be successful. But the critical part of that is that we have to be a part of that and leading those efforts. We can't wait for others to do it for us because we may not all have the same level of education, but we all know what's right and what we need. And we have to step out there on faith, which that's a big part of her life, and Dr. Height when we get to her, and know that we have what is necessary in order for us to not only survive, but to thrive. I know we've been talking about this a lot throughout various episodes of the podcast, but just seeing that. So I just wanted to kind of add that to the education piece, because not only did she start the school, but she $1.50, which I know back then was a lot of money. I don't know what that equates to now, but still that's not a lot of money to start a school. But that we can do this, and just to see her kind of grounded in from that educational perspective and knowing and understanding that a part of our success is going to be that we are very well educated, and we have to have our history. But I know we'll get to that later.
Yes. But and along with understanding the importance of education, I think she moved outside that realm too, right? And we talk about her political activity.
Yes.
So either one of you want to talk about what are some of the ways in which she has really the work she did in the political realm still has a lasting impact on us today?
So one thing that I learned about her, and I just have to say this was really a learning experience for me to even, to prep for the podcast. And these are things though that I feel like I should know, but I don't know to the degree that I should. So one, I want to thank you for even having the opportunity for us to actually have this conversation. But she was a part of the Black Cabinet with Roosevelt back in the 30s, and I think it's my understanding she also created a really good relationship with his wife, which I think she was able to leverage a lot of opportunities. But one of the things that I found very fascinating about that kind of whole relationship with being a part of the Black Cabinet, being a highly respected kind of I don't know if confidant is the correct word, but, kind of advisor to some degree for the president at that time, to really be able to create this space where, I think it's called the Civilian Pilot Training Program, so that you would, that's how our Black pilots, she was instrumental in making sure that we had Black pilots. And we know the impact that they had over in the wars.
Right.
So, I mean, just being able to navigate that back in the 30s as a Black woman, to me, that is just amazing. And we think that we have a lot more kind of space in which to live now. Just think about what she had to go through.
For sure.
Almost 100 years ago, and to be able to be seen as a knowledgeable, valued, experienced, competent African American woman in the 30s. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And so that, I think that's kind of one of the things that I see that she was able to do from the political standpoint, and I think maybe that might have been around the time when we were when the parties were a little bit different.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
back in everyone loves Lincoln, but I don't know if everybody remembers Lincoln was a Republican. I mean, that was who the Republicans were back in the day, and I think Roosevelt kind of ushered in that different look from the Democratic standpoint, and her being a key part of being in that cabinet to help make sure that essential issues that impacted us would help us to kind of gravitate more towards that political party versus Republican.
I think that's important to note in history that never comes. Oh, look, boy, she talking. Yeah, she
see.
I was just reading that Eleanor Roosevelt respected her so much that even at the segregation ruled the Southern Conference, she requested that seats be moved in order for her to sit next to Bethune, Dr. Bethune, at the conference. And then, like Cheryl was saying, Dr. Bethune took it upon herself to send out the message that the Democratic Party was for Black voters.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you said that, because it's important to point out that the shift that was made because of the Depression, right? There's also a year of the Great Depression. That Bethune was how influential she was, and clearly very trusted.
Yes.
And I imagine she showed up as her full, authentic self.
Yes.
So, and I just look at her, I'm like, man, I mean, to be her stature, her aesthetic, right? For her to had to have a load of confidence.
Yes.
Like, you probably couldn't tell Bethune nothing. Yeah. Right? She probably was doing that Black woman like, I'm going to do this. You saying I can't. I'm going to get this school started. And then, lo and behold, she merged with the male school to still have it stand today. And I don't know if anybody ever had the chance to go to Daytona Beach, you have to go to Bethune-Cookman College. The house where she lived still sits in the middle of that campus. I've seen it a couple of times, and it's just amazing how they have preserved it very well. And, I was able to go behind the desk and see what she was reading, the devotional she was reading the day that she made her transition. And it's just a real moving experience as you enter into that house. Like, her spirit, that energy is certainly still there. So just a legacy. And, of course, I always say, people will never die if you keep their name alive. And so she's done so much and poured so much into so many that her legacy indeed lives on. So one of the things she did that's lasting, I think, among so many things, was certainly her founding the National Council of Negro Women, which is an organization of organizations, which leads me to why we're here today to celebrate and lift up the life legacy of Dr. Dorothy Irene Height, who really led the organization for 40 years. And so it's this chance meeting with Bethune that I would say set Dorothy Height on her course. So let's talk a little bit about Dorothy Height and then go into some other questions. So this chance encounter that she had inspired her to work with the NCNW. But let's talk a little bit about who Dorothy Irene Height was. So Sheneca, I'm going to start with you this time around. So who was Dr. Height, and what significant thing, if nobody walks away with anything else, you want people to know and remember about Dr. Height?
So what I really took when I read about Dr. Height was that not only did she like this chance meeting that she had with Dr. Bethune, and then her going into working for the National Council of Negro Women. she set a precedence there too, because I think that all of these women, including Dr. Height, they understood that fighting for social justice for all African American people was, what was the ultimate goal. But I love the fact that they both knew that there had to be a separation when it came to Black women in the work that they were doing. So I know that she had she was voting. I mean, even the things that we were doing down at the Capitol, early on, she was able to. Hold on, I'm trying to find my notes here. She was able to also, she fought for the African American rights, the status of women, which included voting rights for women, and then also reproductive freedom. So they named it reproductive freedom in what I was reading in the article. Right. And then also employment opportunities for women as well. And I feel like, and I know we're going to get into some of this, but I feel like that's a lot of what we do even here now. Like the reproductive rights, we went down to the Capitol, focused only on Black maternal health with our fight. And then also the part about the employment opportunities. We have the CEO program that we do here at Friendship West, and as Cheryl was saying earlier, that's led by a woman, so we understand that the things that they did, we're still trying to, do things still today in order to, I don't know how to say it, like, make their legacy continue today.
Yeah, we're on that trajectory that we're doing. What they've laid the groundwork, and our goal, to your point, is to continue to do more to move it. As I say, move it along a little further. Yeah. Right? They did their part, and we're picking up that baton. We all are, right? Yeah. All of us, me, you, Cheryl, and many others who serve here at the church are doing that in many ways. And I think. So, Cheryl, were you going to say something?
Just to add on that, early on, I think people she recognized her abilities and as being able to be an effective communicator and to understand the environment around her and become an activist. And that was kind of like her driving force for everything. If it was, integrating the YMCA or focusing on, education, employment, some of the things that Sheneca pointed out. I think that just, again, being even back in the 40s and 30s and 50s and being aware of these things and being an activist and figuring out from one move to the next how she was able to continue to build upon that and actually affect change. And what I read about her is that she is credited as the first leader in the civil rights movement to recognize inequality for women and African Americans as a problem that should be addressed as a whole. So, for me, then that gets me back to my public health standpoint, because to me, everything is public health because public health, covers all elements of life. And so I just found that very, very inspiring. And again, showing that we know what it is that needs to be done, and that they had the initiative to do this, and that she was like in the midst of the civil rights movement. Now, do we really know how much she really did? No, I don't think she was. As with many women, they were not recognized for the work that they really did to make sure that movement could move forward. But she was in the middle of that with what are the Big Six?
Yes. Right.
So, so again, just a very influential, competent, progressive woman really out there trying to make sure that as an African American and an African American woman, that we have the things that we need to thrive. And I just, to me, that is so inspiring. And we have to make sure that we are able to tell our entire story. That should be taught from slavery to today. We have to tell that story because I am convinced that our history is a reason part of the reason why she was who she was and the things that she focused on. But if we are not able to continue to educate and tell the whole story, the true story, then I think that's where we run the risk of really ending up somewhere bad. So it's really good just to see her in her time being aware of these things and moving into leadership positions. I mean, I can't imagine working anywhere for 40 years, but what she did, she definitely created the foundation for that organization and the things that they are focusing on today.
Right.
You'll be able to link every one of those things back to them. So
you can trace her back. You can trace it back to Dorothy Heights leadership. And I think Sheneca said one thing, she ran past it, but she said it, that she saw the need to separate, that the black women had issues the white women did not have.
Yes.
But also she had an experience during the civil rights movement that moved her initially, to work with a Gloria Steinem and a Shirley Chisholm. Because she realized, I'm sitting here in this civil rights movement, I'm just as articulate of the issues. I'm working hard, but I'm sitting here close to King, and as you said, the Big Six and many others, but yet never being asked to speak.
Yes.
Right? So I think she understood that, and I think that's probably what led her to labor the way she did.
Yes.
And that's why, to your point, it's so important to continue to keep her legacy alive. And really, this whole, when we do Fannie Lou's Classroom, it's really one big Sankofa moment. And I think that's what we're trying to drive at, is that it's important to always look back and grab and fetch the rich history that they both have, right? That then, as Sheneca said, so that's informing how we're moving forward with reproductive rights. Talk about maternal care. Yeah, we want to talk about all women with maternal care, but black women are suffering the most.
Yes.
And so we know, as they say, you help black women, everybody going to get help.
Yes.
Because when you think about the social hierarchy, we at the bottom. White men, white women, black men, black women. Right? So you get us, everybody's good.
Everybody wins.
Right. So let's now talk about her leadership role. Or anything else you want to talk about Dr. Height? Anything as we're celebrating with, or just maybe a fun fact that people may want to know about Dr. Height that you may have read about?
I just think when it comes to Dr. Height, Dr. Bethune, and even the namesake that we sit in today, Fannie Lou Hamer, I just feel like they understood that their activists needed to be rooted in faith. So that's the thing that gave them the mindset of resilience, with all the things that they had to go through. That created vision. The Bible says without vision, the people perished. So they understood that, early on. And so I know that, there's a lot of different organizations, but even with us that do activist work, but even with us being at Friendship West, we understand that we have to lean on God in order to be able to do this work that we do. So I just think that that's important, that all of the women had that same type of mindset, that, without Christ or whatever religion you choose, but for us, it's Christ. So I just think that was the thread, one of the threads that, threaded them together.
Yeah, it's that faith in what I call that deep well they can draw from. So, we're constantly digging that well every day through our praying, through our fasting, through our, meditating on the scriptures. So, and I said they had to have a deep well they can really lean into. Because I'm sure, we're reading about all the highlights. But I'm sure if Bethune and Dorothy could sit with us, they would tell us some tales. Yes. Right? They would tell us about a lot of injustice they face. So, we hear that part. Because I always think about that part of our sheroes when I read all the wonderful things. I always wonder, but what's the backside? What's that backstory? And that's the part we don't, normally hear. So I'll say this, and I meant to say this about Bethune before we move to Dr. Height. If you ever go to the Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C., please go to the floor with Bethune's room. It's a room dedicated to her life and her ministry and her work. And it's an amazing room and space to be in. You can just go and sit at that table and just learn all about her around the table, around the wall. It's just a phenomenal legacy. So if you ever go, make enough time. Well, you need enough time to go to the whole museum anyway. But have time to sit in that space and allow Bethune to minister to you even in that space. You were going to say something.
You asked us about interesting facts.
Yes.
So to me, this was a very interesting fact that she was on the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. And the reason why that is so important is because that is the group that helped to kind of publish this report called the Belmont Report, which was in response to the Tuskegee syphilis study. So we understand how, the men were given, were exposed to syphilis and were purposely withheld treatment just to see how it would progress. And what this Belmont report did, it really kind of uncover and ended up, I think, kind of highlighting what were the ethical behaviors and expectations that need to happen around research studies that include human subjects. So when you're doing research on people, when you're doing medical and clinical research. So I found that to be very fascinating because we know from our history that we are very, very cautious around seeing health professionals, and especially those individuals who don't look like us. So we have this. We have Fannie Lou Hamer having things done to her that she did not agree to. Henrietta Lacks. I always want to say Slag. And I know that is wrong. And just the medical advancements that we have from her.
That's right.
But she didn't give them permission to do that, and the family didn't know for years that all of these major breakthroughs around medications or advances in cancer was because of her genes that they keep reproducing and making sure that we can do medical advancements. So for me, that was just amazing. Again, a Black woman. Clinical medical research is a major activity. It's needed because that's how we can be healthy. Even though I think there are more holistic approaches, so we're not always on medicine, but that's a whole nother conversation that we could possibly have. But just the fact that she was on that commission, that committee, and in my opinion, kind of an author of what this final report looks like around how you should treat people, one, just in general, but specifically protect them when they are volunteering to be a part of research. Again, a Black woman, a part of that process to make sure, to ensure, to demand that we are treated humanely and that we are protected. We don't go into research coming out worse than we started. I know sometimes that can happen, but you need to understand kind of, all
at least
that.
Yes, you'll know you may get a placebo.
Yes.
You can make an informed decision up and against. You think, I'm going to get this treatment.
Yes, and never knowing that it was purposely withheld just to see how it's going to impact the body.
Which just lends itself to this notion of just how Black bodies have always been viewed as dispensable. Yes. From enslavement up until this point. Just like we talked about last week about Black women's bodies, we won't backtrack on that. But it's directly tied to plantation economy. Yes. And plantation politics, right? So to your point. And leave it to Cheryl. I always go back to health.
Well, that's my baby.
That's your exactly. We
can also talk about her political influence the same way we did with Dr. Bethune. Dorothy Heights, she had political influence where I read where President Eisenhower, she pushed him to desegregate schools. That's a whole nother subject too, because we could talk about how people think that's a good or bad thing, desegregation today. But she had that influence, on President Eisenhower to do that. And then also President Johnson, he appointed Black women to government positions because of her influence as well. So she had that influential political realm as well.
So they continue to demonstrate what we already do every day with Black women, that we interdisciplinary in our approach to life and work. Yes. They both did that in a very powerful way. And you're right, we need to have a conversation around desegregation of schools. So I think it's a misconception about what the Black folks were asking for. They weren't asking to go to school with white children. They were asking for the resources
Yes.
right? And it's a really good book called Jim Crow's Pink Slip, and what happened with desegregation, how our principals, teachers were fired and put out of work, and then no one was really there to care for our children in those schools. That's a hope. We definitely need to have that conversation, because I think it's just critically important to understand why. But I think people have a tendency, we want to be with the white folks in school, and that was not the case. We want a better schools and resources.
Yes.
You could have given us the money.
Books, a table,
Right, you don't-
pencils,
right.
Yeah.
Just,
Basic
what
stuff.
you need to learn.
Yes.
So I think that's very important. I just think she has. It's so much to learn and know about her. And again, I think yet another woman who I'm sure she showed up and walked in rooms. It was like, Dr. Heights is
She
here.
looked like a little lady.
She
Though.
was-
She
yeah, she-
kind of reminded me of my grandma. Just a little.
And them short folks be having that, they be feisty.
Yeah.
So I imagine she showed up in space as her full, authentic self too, unapologetically. And I think that's one of the things I lean into with both of them. I think they were unapologetically, unashamedly Black women showing up in their fullness. And again, I'm sure they paid the price for that in various different ways. But despite all of that, they accomplished so much. So, Sheneca, let me ask you this question. What are some of the major threads that we women from the civil rights movement, justice movement, and I guess what we call the current day movements together?
One of the threads is what I talked about earlier, just that activism that's rooted in faith. The second thread that I think threads us all together is just our understanding of education. We have to, knowledge is still power, even though, that's another thing. We have these conversations today of whether or not college should go to college, should not go to college, if it's still relevant to go to college. But as I said, knowledge is still power. The more we know, that's why they don't want us to know about our history, because, the more we know, then the more we're able to fight against. And I was just listening to something with Roland Martin yesterday, and he was saying,
What Roland talking about?
I like Roland.
he was talking about, education as far as voting rights go. When you're just going out there and just asking somebody, to register to vote, but you're not giving them the education behind why they're registering, why they're, he said he just asked the person the question like, what is important to you? And then once the person give him the answer of what's important to him, then he's able to educate them on, okay, if this is important to you, then this is why you need to vote. This is why you need to register to vote. So knowledge, we still need that. And then another thread that I feel like threads all of the civil rights movement activists and then the social justice activists today is that, like I said, normally they aim primarily to gain freedom and equality for all African American people, but as women we have our separate issues as well. So women in the movement, we're still continuing to see that we want equality and freedom for everybody, of course, color, race, whatever, but we also want to make sure that Black women are held at a standard as well. And then those are the positive things that I feel like, the things that thread us together. But as we were talking about before, there's also this, I don't know if we want to say it's a negative thing, but, it's a thread of what we're doing today in justice work and what they did. The thread of, sometimes growing tired and weary,
Yes.
And as we said before, Fannie Lou Hamer, we all know her saying she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then I was also reading on Dr. Bethune when she was describing the Council House. And it was saying that the Council House is also a historic landmark in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've ever gone there before. But it was saying she was just talking about, she was describing the house, but then she was talking about how so many feet had tread what she called the velvet carpet of the house. And she was saying famous feet, humble feet, feet of eager workers, and then feet of those who are in need, and then tired feet. And then she described her feet as being tired, at the time. So, even though this fight, we have to take a step back and be like, okay, how do I recalibrate? So we have to do that even now all the time, just in all of the stuff that comes at us, you know.
Right.
So,
And I think that's why faith is important. That's why Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and carrying them heavy burdens,
Yes.
and I'll give you rest." Like, right, that you'll find rest for your soul when you exchange your burdens for his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And I think that is certainly, they had to lean into that. I'm glad you said that about Bethune, 'cause I think we don't hear enough about, we just think they went. No, they were tired too.
Yes.
You know, they were tired too. So I thank you for kind of showing those threads, because I think this really speaks to Dr. Angela Davis always says, you know, freedom is a constant struggle. And so it's just always, we're on this trajectory. And while we should never try to compare movements. When we say things like, we're not our ancestors, it's not your grandmother's movement. It's not about the compare. It's about focus on what you need to do to move us a little further. Like, 'cause I think that comparison does not do us, it doesn't no good. And the reality is, and I said this the other day when I was doing chapel, I was like, you know, the reason why you can go out and march in the streets and get up in that police officer's face and not be swinging from a tree
Yes.
is because some ancestors did the work before you got here.
Yes.
Right? So it's also this notion of, we out here doing this work, but you're doing it in a particular way, and you can do it that way without those type of immediate threats being on your life.
Yes.
Right? So I think we have to learn how to, we're not in competition and we're not enemies. And we just have to learn how, again, Sankofa, what do we fetch? Now, how do we move forward? Because we still have to think about what is it we need to do in our day and time.
Yes.
What are we being called to do now, though we have those common threads that you pointed out, in the importance of knowing history, right? And you mentioned education. So formal education, I still think, you know, I'm saying, for me personally, yes, I think people should still, if college is for them, they should go to college. But we need to talk about the way in which that saddles people with scholarship debt.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't even make it attainable for people. And not only that, if college is not for people, there's so many other ways to be educated, right? Because education is not just in the school, in a formal space, right? You can get education in a lot of ways, but it's about it's how do you feed your mind, and what are you feeding your mind? And if you watch, for example, like In Class with Carr, with Dr. Carr and Professor Hunter, I mean, I watch it on Saturdays. I'm like, this was a whole semester of class right here. Like, for them, they're jailbreaking the academy, if you will. So some of this also that we're always growing, always learning, always reading. And I'm sure you probably, I don't know if you read even more now that you're here at French West. I don't know. If you, but because it helps us connect dots. It helps what we're doing by way of the work make sense.
Yes.
Right? Because then you understand why we do what we do. But because how you're reading now that's why we do what we do. Oh, so we're really doing what they did. We're just now continuing that with the host of it. So that makes sense. And I think that's why history is so important. But Cheryl, what's the danger that we're in right now in relationship to being able to know our history, is particularly for our young people?
Yes, I think that as many people may not know, you know, in Texas, and I think I learned this from you, is like, as the school books are determined, it's kind of based on what happens here, and then however the textbooks are structured, then that's what all other states will buy. And so this kind of reimagining history, so where we were
Erasure and revisionism.
That we were just so happy to be here, work for free, and be beaten, and our families torn apart, and just keeping out, you know, just even our kind of the folks that we look to as our key kind of figures in history for African Americans. I think that when we lose the ability to understand the true history of this country, we are definitely going to repeat what has happened. And I think with this new generation, it is so important that they get engaged. And I think about my girls who will be 16 next month, and just trying to increase the awareness and the urgency from their standpoint to really have a better understanding of our history, and to get involved and to understand and see what has been done in the past by these great women that we're focusing on today. And there are other people, but we're primarily focusing on women, and that they have the ability to actually affect change. And then I think about the folks who are going to be younger than them, where the books are going to be totally devoid of any of this information. From a kind of a country, a nation standpoint, that is a huge, I think, threat to us
For sure.
moving forward. And what I see happening is that systems are being set up, even though the populace is going to look very, very different.
Yeah.
The power structure is still only going to be with this minority of folks who are so they can kind of keep this environment of oppression and stifle what it is that we can actually attain to be. And I think that as a people we are good. We know what it's like to struggle. So is it our intent to make it harder for other people? I just inherently think that's not who we are. I just inherently think that's not who we are. But I feel like if the others think that we are going to be in positions of power, then somehow we're going to make their life hard like ours. And that's just my own personal opinion.
For sure.
But so I feel like that's the struggle that we're on right now, when we're losing this ability to accurately and appropriately educate our young people and our young people to be that aren't here yet, to make sure they really understand our history and not repeat mistakes, and to embrace. I mean, diversity is a good thing, and learning.
Yeah, but see, I think for us, we never have a problem with diversity. We always including people.
Yes.
In fact, sometimes we too quick
Exactly.
to be diverse.
To our detriment.
So,
Yes.
and I think for white folks, I know you're being nice about it and saying, those people. But it is that quadrant of white folks who are terrified of the demographic shifts. And
Yes.
I don't know if some of it could be like, what's going to happen if they get on top? Where they do that's just guilt.
Yes.
That's just guilt, right? But some of that is also like, I don't want my life to be disrupted. So some of it is that they're going to maintain not an oppressive environment, but oppressive structures.
Sure.
It's about power.
Yes.
And they understand that. 'Cause
Yes.
they understand we can be the number one minority, no problem, because we're going to gerrymander.
Yes.
We're going to have all the power. We're going to have the political power
Yes.
and economic power. If I have that, it doesn't matter.
Yes. Which is why we need to vote.
So, but we have to still fight. But when you gerrymander, that's the whole point of gerrymandering, right? To dilute your vote.
Yeah. Yes.
And so we have to also make sure that we are very much deeply engaged down in Austin, unfortunately in Texas every other year. But wherever you are, how do you, and for our electeds that we elect,
Yes.
hold them more accountable,
Yes.
and to be able, so hold them accountable, make sure they do what they do, so we can and then tell them we have your back out here,
Yes.
but you must go in there and have our back, right? That you have to stand 10 toes down up in those legislative sessions and stay on your square regardless. And but we can only do that when we see you moving and working.
Yes. And getting back to something that you said in some of the past podcasts about the importance and the role of the church in education. And when I say education, sort of like what I think I heard you say earlier in the very broad sense. It's not just kind of your formal ABCs,
Right.
1, 2, 3s, but, civic engagement,
Right.
Public policy,
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So we have lots of opportunity and work to do around that, because to your point, you can't just go out and it's more than just voting. It's more than
Right.
just registering. It's more than just voting. I mean, to get to that point, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to occur, and making sure that systems are in place that are
Right.
going to actually benefit us. And again, to the earlier point, when it benefits us, it benefits everyone, because we're the bottom of the rung. So,
It's the systems and it's organizing the people, and you have to walk with people through this process.
Yes.
And to your point, when Roland was saying, you just go tell people to vote. Well, they may go vote, and then what?
Yes.
You're starting this, and I say this to y'all all the time, don't I? Every voting cycle, what I say, We doing the same thing over again. We're begging people to go, dragging people to the polls, but people not engaged beyond the moment.
Yes.
And we have to do a better job at staying engaged. And we have to see the severity of where we are in this nation. I'm just see white folks understand that. That's why you're like, oh no, well we see what's getting ready to happen. Let's start moving these pieces on the. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's what we need to be thinking 50, 100 years down the road.
Yes. Yes.
Usually we think 6 months backwards because we trying to catch up.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right, so I think that in Dorothy Heights and Mary McLeod Bethune, they were forward thinkers.
Yes.
Because clearly they were thinking years ahead.
Yes.
When you look at their legacies. And so let's talk about the legacy that Dorothy Heights left at NCNW and so the programming that they have.
Yes.
So I want to let you jump in first. Go ahead, Cheryl. Jump in.
So they have 4 major pillars that they're working on around economic empowerment and entrepreneurship, social justice, health equity. Well, I just get all excited about that. And then from the education standpoint, they call it STEAM. So, and when you think about their legacy and to have an organization that's international,
right,
focused on, obviously they want everyone to succeed, but really focused on women and women of African descent, African women. It is absolutely to understand that they again had the fortitude and the foresight to understand that these are the types of structural changes that need to be in place to make sure that we're in the position to thrive. So the health equity one, just so I have to talk about that one. So they have like 6 major target areas: breast cancer, HIV/AIDS, affordable health care, mental health, maternal health, and they focus on the COVID-19 because this is a new kind of committee for them that was established in 2021. But again, in all of those areas, we are at the bottom of the rung. The Office of Minority Health, if you ever want to know kind of where we sit, we African Americans in general, and then if you want to look at men, women, children, that's a great website to go to. But we're at the bottom of the barrel around all of those things. And just to know that through their leadership and vision and kind of the structure that they put in place, that now we have an organization, again, international, because they have international membership. And it's just amazing that now, that is going to be a priority for them to focus on from the health equity lens and to really kind of look at those things, structural issues that really prevent us from getting the type of service that we have. And then if we have another pandemic, that we're not going to be the ones who are the worse off.
Exactly.
Moving forward. So that's very exciting for me. So I'll stop and see if Sheneca wants to talk about the other 3. But
yeah, but that's the foresight of Bethune. It started as it was always international, right?
Yes.
And that's what I mean by it, in connecting the global dots.
Yes.
And she saw, and that's one of the things we have to. And I'm gonna get to you in a minute. Hold your thought, because this is like I'm so adamant about. If we do not see ourselves as part of the diaspora, we'll continue to struggle. Even more so than what we probably ordinarily wouldn't have to, because we're connecting those dots and we're then building resources and global power.
Yes.
Right? Because it's the same system, whether it's in America, whether it's in Ghana, whether it's in Brazil, right? It's the same colonial system and the vestiges of that, the lasting impacts of what that means, right? And so I think that's so important, and I think they definitely Bethune saw herself as global.
Yes.
Now, she definitely worked with all people, but I felt like she still knew, I know where I sit in this world.
Yes.
And in this diasporic community. Okay, Sheneca, what about which one you like?
I was just looking at the social justice.
Oh, really?
And it just goes from, like Black women owning their own political power and rebuilding hope. And, it talked about, like, the ticket with the Biden-Harris ticket, Black women, because we really pushed that ticket. We're expecting a return on our investment from them. So that's one of the things that they were saying. And then another thing is that Black women were on the front lines when it came to the pandemic. we're on the front lines all the time.
We are the front line. We are the front line.
And then when it comes to affordable home ownership, Black women and families remain behind in that. So, you know, it's kind of hard for a Black woman, especially a single Black woman with children, to purchase a home. So I think it is smart to look at ways, put in programs, structures, systems, whatever it takes, in order to make that an easier process for Black women to be able to raise their kids in homes. So those were 3 of the major things that I looked at. under the
Cool.
social justice.
And I think this whole thing that we always on the front line, it ain't because we want to be. We tired too.
Yes.
You said, Fannie, so I'm sick and tired. Yeah, we are too, Fannie. But we know if we don't,
Who's going to do it?
you know, like when Doug Jones got elected in Alabama, Black women turned out not because they like, well, we don't want a pedophile in
Yes.
Congress.
Yes.
And we're like, we want to. So a lot of times, yeah, we always on the front line fighting and all this because we know we in trouble if we don't.
Yes.
We know we clear about where we sit.
Yes.
And I think overall, this also reminds me, you know, here we always, you know, do our Broken Wells lecture series, which is designed around how we continue to talk about why womanist theology and womanist practitioners are so critical, right, to our survival. And when you think about Dorothy Heights, her life, her legacy, she would probably be what we would call a womanist today, about how she lived her life, right? It's so with Bethune, so many others, right? Well, let me not say all, because some I would say were race women, which would be different, I think, in my viewpoint. From a womanist, but certainly critical. So I think when we talk about that today, we say, well, we believe in womanist theologians. We employ a womanist theology. We see ourselves as womanist practitioners, that people don't have to run from that. Because as Yolanda Pierce say, in my grandmama's house, I mean, your grandmamas, your big mamas did it.
Yes.
They did it. So the Academy, right, just gave us language
Yes.
for it, but we've always done it.
Yes.
So we want to say happy birthday, early birthday to Dr. Irene Height, 111 years ago. She would have been, now you get all hype. Oh, y'all, she can get hyped and loud. I think she'll feel she broke in. Now we're going to bring her back for another show.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
She was on board, so you said, no. And Brooke, too, because she over there laughing. We're going to get you, too, Brooke. We got to hear all these voices. But, yeah, so thank you all so much for having us a lively conversation today. And so people can see, you're always behind the scenes. They can see you're also out here doing this work. And you have a lot to offer as well. So we thank you for tuning in to this week's Fannie Lou's Classroom. We have 2 more episodes before season 2 comes to an end. And you do not want to miss the last 2. Next week is going to be a phenomenal conversation. I'm going to have the Reverend Dr. David Malcolm Magruder, Executive Pastor here at Friendship West, and my good friend Reverend Damian Madison, who is the former Senior Pastor of the Life Church. And we're going to talk about Black men and Black women and how we love, how we relate to one another, whether it's a platonic relationship or a romantic relationship. We're going to go all the way back to how were we prior to the disruption, prior to the European slave trade. What are some things we need to get back to that we can be more healthy and whole just as individuals? Then as people, then we start talking about being in relationships romantically. We got a lot of work we need to do. I'm so excited to have that conversation with both of them. Sheneca and Cheryl tell me I can talk because I always say other people can talk a lot. So it's going to be live because Reverend Madison and Reverend Magruder can go.
Yes.
And it's going to, I'm excited about it. And I'm just going to sit back and kind of moderate, but also talk about it too. It should be a great conversation. And we're going to then end our season with Mama, I'm calling Mama Itahari Torre because she's my mother in ministry. But Dr. Itahari Torre is going to close us out with how do we remember and return to some traditions, rituals that allowed our ancestors, right, not just survive, but to thrive, to overcome, to deal with all they were up against, like a Bethune, like a Dorothy Heights. We're super excited. She's going to do that, and you don't want to miss it. She is a wealth of knowledge. She's going to give you some tools you can use. She's going to break down, she's going to bring that word into it and show you how to live that out every day. It's going to be a powerful episode as well. So meet us next Thursday, 12 o'clock noon. Tell everyone you know about it. Meet us here next Thursday and the following Thursday for our last episode of season 2. Thank you for supporting season 2. We appreciate it. And listen, we need your support. We have these beautiful Fannie Lou Classroom t-shirts for sale. You can get yours today by going to friendshipwest.org/justice. And on our justice page, you will see a Fannie Lou Classroom tab that says purchase your t-shirt. That t-shirt helps this go, keeps it going, helps us bring in guests, and the best guests who can really have good conversations around subject matters that are important to our community that can lead to our well-being overall. So thank you for joining us on today. Don't forget to tell your folks to like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live. And don't forget to jump on friendshipwest.org. Sign up for the Sip and See this Saturday, and then join us for worship service on Sunday starting at 10 o'clock a.m. with our guest preacher, Reverend Francis Cudjoe Waters. Thank you for being in the classroom. We'll see you next week.
From the church house.